which is a really peculiar and strange place to be. So first thing to say is that on a technical level, it is breathtaking. I mean, it is really incredibly well done. After seeing the film, I tried to read as much as possible about how it was actually done. Jon Favreau seems to say that the key to it was that you create the environment in a virtual reality setting that is generated by an engine game, by game engine. And then that they allow the cameras to move physically within that environment because it's a virtual environment. What that does is it puts back in the human element of shooting within an environment that is unreal. And I know that sounds complicated, but it works. It is definitely true that when you watch it, you do feel that those environments are real, those savannas are real, that rock is real, that journey to the elephant's grave, it's real. And you know, there's that phrase that turns up in the thing, everything the light touches, elephant the light touches, everything the light touches. And that phrase, the light touches, I mean, it feels really tactile. I know it's this kind of honeydew glow of gorgeous, it's like kind of permanent golden hour, except for in the sort of post-Mufasa landscape in which it's heavy on the carcass. But, you know, you do feel that light is touching you. And then in terms of the creation of the creatures, they are rendered, I mean, technology is, if this may be different if you're younger, if you're our age and you've grown up seeing the emergence of CG technology and, you know, watching Toy Story for the first time, and then you get to this, you do go, blimey, because we've seen, you know, computer graphic lions before, but they always looked a bit wobbly. These don't. I mean, the moment, you know, you do feel that you could reach out and run your fingers through the lion's mane, except that it might bite your hand off. So on a technical level, I think it's astonishing. It's a very, very good voice cast. They're all doing great work, and I do think that Chiwetel Ejiofor, you're quite right. And one thing I think I didn't appreciate so much is that Scar did think for a while that he had a shot, and then along came Simba, and then it was, so it kind of, in a way, his resentment is even greater. His desire for power, because it was closer than I actually thought before. My question is this, and my question is vaguely philosophical. Is photorealist animation a way to go with a story which is fantastic? For example, Lion King on stage, right? Because of the way it's done, you don't think they're actually lions, but you engage your imagination, and you know, like Warhorse, it's a theatrical device that makes you see as your mind fills in the gap. When you're watching animation, hand-drawn animation, I mean, if you think of, you know, any example like The Talented Princess Kaguya, you're not looking at the photorealist thing, you're looking at something in which you're seeing the drawn line, you're seeing the charcoal, you're seeing the wash of pencil, you're seeing the sweep of the paintbrush. Your brain, you know, understands all that, but it believes in the characters.
Excuse me.
Yes, they are real. Is the character in Ponyo real? Yes, it is real, although it doesn't look photoreal. But when you create something that is photoreal, as in your mind looks at it and goes, that's actually a real antelope, or that's actually a real warthog, or that's actually a real ant. The only reason I know it's not real is firstly that it's behaving as real. Yes, they have the best animal trainers in the world, or it's not real. And more importantly, it's singing. That's always a clue, isn't it? And if I have a conceptual problem, I do have a conceptual, I don't know what the answer to this is. I don't know whether that format is the best for a fantasy film in which the engagement of the imagination is part of it. The idea of the talking, singing, you know, and the story is, for me, that it's like with fairy tales and with fantasy and with anything that has a fabulous flavour to it. My own feeling is that I would rather watch the story with the space to fill in the gaps. There is something very strange about watching something in which, down to the last pixel, it looks real. And maybe not everybody would feel the same way. I think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be a great success. And that question at the end about, I mean, yes, there's darkness in it, but there always was, and in any of the Disney stuff, there's always been darkness anyway. You know, I mean, heaven knows that Disney's, thing is built on. But I did think, I'm not entirely sure what the point of it is. With Jungle Book, obviously you had the character of Neil Setti was alive, character within this otherwise constructed world. And Favreau has done an absolutely seamless job of creating this completely total world that, as Dutel Ejiofor said then, you feel that you could walk around in it. You feel you could literally walk around in it. I just don't know whether that absolute, it's on screen, it's absolutely photo real, best serves the story. For myself, I want a little bit of a gap. But it does say something about the technicality of the filmmaking that I've literally come out of it thinking, my problem is philosophical, not technical.
So you want the animation to be less real?
I know
they came to you and said, Mark, what should we do? You would say, dial it down a bit.
No, I wouldn't listen to me because I'm a film critic. All I can do is I can tell you that my brain sat there thinking that there is a disjunct between the realism of what I'm seeing and the fantasy of the story. And I don't know. I'm not saying. I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know that.
You absolutely don't know.
That's the best way to go with that story. But I am very impressed by how it did. I just came out of it going, I love. This sounds bad. I love. I love the thing that you can fill in. I did feel that it was a bit there because we've done all the work.
Here's the thing: Seth Rogen can't sing.
No, I know. No, Seth Rogen can sing to save his life.
James called it sick today.
Jurassic World, which is, obviously you had Jurassic Park, Lost World, Jurassic Park 3, Long Gap, now Jurassic World. And Jurassic World essentially ignores 2 and 3 and picks up from Jurassic Park. New Blah is now a fully functioning dinosaur park, although they now live in a modern economy in which everybody's got so used to the idea of dinosaurs that apparently de-extinction is no longer big news.
So the island is back in, despite everything.
Well, it's you sort of ignore the second two new block. And so what happens is that everyone's got kind of bored with the idea of dinosaurs, and so that the park's owners have decided what they really need to do is to make new dinosaurs that are bigger, louder, noisier, scarier, and have more teeth. Which they have been doing. Well, apparently they've been doing it in secret, and certainly it's something that is a surprise to Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt, meanwhile, is PR'd and developing a relationship with the philosopher. He is sort of in the same way as what we might do. Yeah. He sort of much like we would do with Doctor. In fact, the scene which I've seen, which has been much trailed, in which he runs into the cave, and somebody in there is filming the script, and he sort of manages to put them off by saying, stay, pretend. And they're still very, very dangerous, but we seem to be somewhere towards training. Meanwhile, Dallas Howard, who I keep referring to as House Party Dallas, because I get the name in the wrong order, is the operations manager. There is there's a romantic thing sort of in the background between her and him, but she basically needs him to do something because they have created a genetic dinosaur.
I get to evaluate the paddock for vulnerabilities.
Why me?
I guess Mr. Masrani thinks since you're able to control the raptors.
It's all about control with you. I don't control the raptors. It's a relationship based on mutual respect. You and I never had a second date.
Excuse me, I never wanted a second date.
Turns out an itinerary for a night out.
I'm a nice person. All of them, actually. And what kind of a man shows up to a date in board shorts?
Central America, it's hot.
Okay. Can we just focus on the asset, please?
The asset? Look, I get it. You're in charge out here, you gotta make a lot of tough decisions. It's probably easier to pretend these animals are just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're not. They're alive. Sounds like Seth Rogen. That would have been a different movie.
So, Anyway, you know what's going to happen, obviously, because you've seen Jurassic Park, and apparently that nobody's learned anything from the first 3 movies, which is the whole thing that Jeff Goldblum said, which is that basically in any given situation, chaos has a way of reigning, and nature will take its own course, and this isn't going to work out well. And
You don't
very
mind,
much
do
Jurassic
you?
Park movie.
Oh, I
At the
really
beginning,
think
there is sort
you
of
are
set up,
putting
and there
on
are
a
people walking
brave
around the
face.
parks in the very first
Shouldn't
movie
be
that's
hiding.
functioning yet, and then in the second,
Like, you should
things
be
got
out
really
there
bad, and there
celebrating
is
life.
now the trailer,
That reminds
which
me
has
of
been
the
very shown everywhere. There's that thing of the Mosasaurus coming out of the water and eating the shark. You know,
What Saurus?
There's some weird stuff
Mosasaurus.
going on
Mosasaurus.
here. Who's
Big,
throwing
like
shit?
an underwater, snappy crocodile dinosaur leaps out of the.
No.
You've seen that?
I don't think I've seen this one.
Huh?
It's everywhere.
I haven't been there.
You've just been everywhere else. Okay, fine. So leaps out of the thing, snaps, and the kind of cheeky suggestion of this is, hey, this movie is so big, it's going to eat Jaws for breakfast. Because
Excellent.
Jaws was 40 years ago, and certainly in terms of spectacle, it delivers a sort of rip roaring summer blockbuster.
Look, I'll
I have
just
no
keep
doubt
wondering, I'm sure.
money, and it's going to, fulfill its popcorn promises in terms of giving you spectacle. Essentially, the dinosaurs were created through CG and motion capture with a small amount of old school animatronics, and there's action sequences, there's dinosaurs,
All right,
versus
gather
men,
up.
there's dinosaurs versus dinosaurs,
This is
there's
briefing
the
room
stuff that
four
you would
of the
want,
day.
and I saw
Most
it
of
in
the guests have
IMAX
arrived now.
3D
Tyler should be
and
just about finished.
Square, and certainly there was no. We weren't going to come out of it and go, well, there wasn't enough stuff. There was plenty of stuff. The problem with it is this: throughout the movie, it keeps nodding back to Steven Spielberg's back catalogue. So we get there are nods. There's actually, I think, just a particular nod to the death of Susan Baglini's character at the beginning of Jaws. There's one moment when there's a herbivore which is lying wounded, and you almost expect it to go. And then there's another bit in which we see the dinosaur eye outside the car, which is very, very similar to Jurassic Park. The dinosaur eye coming down. So there are these moments in which it deliberately sort of quotes and cites those former movies. And what that does is it makes you remember what it was about the former movies that worked so well. And in the case of Steven Spielberg, Spielberg's back catalogue has always managed to balance character and action when it worked. Now, to some extent, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull sort of, dropped the ball. But when his movies work, and particularly if you go back and you look at Jaws, which is 40 years ago, the key thing with Jaws was they couldn't make the shark work. Okay, they had 3 rubber sharks, all of them got bruised, none of them worked. So
All right, gather
Spielberg
up.
had to work around it.
This is briefing
And he had to
room
develop this kind of
of the day.
Hitchcockian mode
Most
of
of the
making you
guests
feel
arrived
terror,
now.
making you feel scared, making you feel tension. But the central thing was you cared about the characters, you cared about the people. Now, even in Jurassic Park, that is absolutely central. Yes, Jurassic Park at the time was an extraordinary spectacle, but it was to do with the way that spectacle was presented. It was to do with the fact that you cared about the characters. Once again, it was to do with adult characters who weren't yet ready for parenthood, children who were sort of being abandoned, children in danger. It fitted into the whole Spielberg. Now, in the case of Jurassic World, the script has been in development for such a long time, basically 10 years, during which time it's gone through various rewriters, writers of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, credited in this, Colin Trevorrow, and his writer on Safety Not Guaranteed, credited also there's some sales was involved in it, there's been some central involvement from Steven Spielberg in the executive production. And what that means is that the whole thing ended up with lots of holes in it. And when you're watching the film, it's not just there are plot holes big enough for a massive Tyrannosaurus Rex to run through with ease. There are holes in the character development, details that are never characters that don't behave in ways that are anyway natural or make you believe in them. So actually what you get is this incredible sort of mishmash of spectacular special effects and stuff that you're familiar with and riffs that you know and nods towards a great heritage of the cinema that really does take back to Jaws, because everybody's been talking about recently. Jaws film all those years ago started the creature feature cinema in a way that few managed to reproduce. But when you look at those movies, they are written. They have really well developed characters. They have really well developed narratives. They have really clever personal interactions. And this doesn't have any of that. What it has is
You are
it has
needed
3D
at the
has
inauguration.
solidly two-dimensional
And there are
characters.
some other
right?
issues I'd
Characters
like to
that
run
are
by you.
There was been some criticism
Cornelia,
about whether or
don't
not
go.
the role was too sort of
Right.
towards, you know, romancing the stone, that kind of, you know, archetype of bearing and stress. But it's not as simple as that. But it's not that different from it either. When things start to go wrong, very few of the characters behave in a way that seems to bear any relationship to how you would behave if you suddenly had a catastrophic outbreak that is happening on the island. And people's interpersonal relations seem to happen in fits and starts with dramatic arcs, big chunks and blips. So all the way through, you feel like what you're watching is something that is mechanically impressive. I mean, I don't mean mechanical as in, you know, animatronic. I mean, the film has a mechanical function. It gives you big spectacle, big roars, big loud stuff, you know, all that sort of thrilling stuff. But it's incoherent, and you end up thinking it's got scales but no soul. It's big on the outside and loud and raw, and its arc is worse than its bite. And it's a shame, because I remember sitting in, I think it was the Odeon, it might be the Empire, when Jurassic Park, the first one, came out, and seeing people really sort of riveted by it. When we got to the Raptor Raid, and incidentally, there is nothing in this that matches the tension of the Raptor Raid from the original. Seeing people literally doing that, sitting on the edge of their chairs,
It's
and I was
just a
thinking at
drink.
the time,
You don't
well, it's
mind
good, but
what
it's not Jaws.
Oh,
But
excuse
actually,
me. I think you
compared
forgot
to this,
something.
it is Jaws. I mean,
Look,
you know,
excuse me?
the director has come from Safety Not Guaranteed, which is very much like Gareth Edwards, you know, coming from a small, sort of fantasy-inflected, weird little character story, and going, okay, fine, now I'm going to make a huge leap up to make a great big blockbuster. And in the case of what Gareth
It's
Edwards did
just
with
a
Godzilla, I
drink.
think
You don't mind, do you?
the genetic
I really
code of
think you
monsters
are
with
putting
it.
on a...
So that
Huh?
in the middle of Godzilla, in the middle of the, you know, the
is that yours?
skydiving and the huge beasts fighting each other, you did still have a sense of
Look,
character.
I'll
that
just have the one
you
drink. I'm
just
sure if I...
don't have
What?
in Jurassic World. So
Sir,
big, loud, shouty monsters doing that stuff, fine.
It's just a drink. You
Flat,
don't mind, do you?
badly drawn
I
thumbnail
really
sketch
think
characters
you are putting
and a
on
plot
a brave
which
face.
is
You shouldn't be
wholly
hiding
to the
back
point
here.
of
You
incoherence.
should be out there celebrating life. Oh no, that reminds me. I'm supposed to talk to Richard.
Sir. Hello.
I went into this with
frightened of
probably
him.
higher
His review
expectations than
of
perhaps
the
I should have been,
Senses
because
exhibition
I'm
was
a huge fan of
brutal.
Jay Allen. You know, he made Monster
But
Calls, he made
I'd
The
rather be
Orphanage,
here supporting you.
thank you.
and I.
Jeez.
He's somebody who's demonstrated that he is able to balance effects and story. And I think the moments
Not now,
in Jurassic
please.
World
You've
Fallen
got to be
Kingdom when it
kidding me.
works best are the moments that you feel are the things that you're interesting there. You know, Chris Pratt saying, you know, plant flowers
It's really
make the
sweet
grave
of
deep
you,
for the
but
garden.
I'm
But I also think that
As long
he's
as
sort of
you
digging
know I'm
through.
here.
Look, there are moments
said.
that look really important to him, and there's one moment.
So
you and I were
if
talking
something
about
goes
this
wrong
before,
or...
which is actually really good. There is a sequence in it in which all that stuff that Bayona does well, which is kind of gothic and it's chilling and it's related to the history of horror and it's to do with children and childhood fantasies, that sort of stuff. All those moments come together in one particular scene in the film, which I don't want to sort of spoil for anybody, but you'll recognise it with it as a very, very deliberate nod to Nosferatu, and it's done very well. And when I look at that moment in the film, I think, okay, that's really what I want from the whole of the film. Inevitably, you don't get that. What you get is a franchise blockbuster in which whenever you bring in, whenever you have like a very artistic director and a franchise, there's a fight between the two of them, and it's which one is going to come out on top. So when it's Duncan Jones directing Warcraft, is it more Duncan Jones or is it more Warcraft? And in the case of Jordan Vogt Roberts doing Kong Skull Island, is it more Jordan Vogt Roberts or is it more a great big King Kong movie? And I think this works out about sort of 30-70%. It felt about 30% felt like the movie that I wanted Bayona to be making, and 70% felt like the franchise, what the franchise needed. So, for example, when Chris Pratt in that interview was talking about that there is more use for animatronics. I mean, I know there was some discussion before about the animatronics in inverted commas of Jurassic World. People saying, yeah, but there really are very, very few of them. People are just saying that to make it feel more physical. I felt that, as I felt with the other one, that the effects are done well. I mean, I do believe that those creatures are running around. There's only a few moments in which it looks to me like, okay, we're in a CG world.
Please stand back.
I've kind of got used to that now because we're this far down the line with the Jurassic Park. I no longer go into a Jurassic Park movie wondering whether they're going to make me convinced about dinosaurs. I remember seeing Jurassic Park the first time and thinking, wow, there's dinosaurs running around, and also thinking the first Jurassic Park was really scary in places. I mean, the scene with the raptors when they're in the kitchen is really scary. It's kind of up there with the key moments of Jaws. And
Oh, you're here.
that stuff, saying it's got great
Wonderful. I
questions,
didn't
okay, fine.
after your tragic.
As far as the story is concerned, it makes no sense. But there's an interesting flip, which is, okay, this time, and it's in the trailer, and he says, oh, a rescue op to save the dinosaurs from an island that's about to explode. What could go wrong? Okay, so that's the flip. They've changed the two central roles, the two central characters, again, with Bryce Dallas Howard said in that interview. But that's kind of it. It's like, okay, now we're going to go back to the island to save the dinosaurs, but it's no surprise when ulterior motives rear their heads. It's no surprise that actually, as we've always known through all the Jurassic Park things, the underlying thing through all this is not altruism, it's exploitation of money. Enter Toby Jones with the most brilliant hair and teeth arrangement. I mean, it's literally like he must have gone to makeup and said, I want to be sinister from your teeth up.
He's bad, Toby.
He is bad, Toby. And I think he brings a real sense of fun to that role, and also a sense of menace. I think he's enjoying himself, and it's kind of right because it's got a slightly pantomime edge. There is a particularly pantomime edge towards the end of his character arc. And I think he does that well. But I did spend a lot of the film thinking, okay, I'm not seeing a huge amount that's new. I'm not feeling this has suddenly changed direction. In the previous Jurassic World, I did feel like, okay, the characters are two-dimensional and the dinosaurs are more convincing. This did have, I believed in the character
Darling,
interaction.
you know how it
really,
works.
really,
We've gone
really
over this
made no
1,000
sense
times.
whatsoever.
See what
And
you
bear
can
in
do,
mind,
and if
there are
everything
huge amounts of
fails,
things in Jurassic
then you get
World
me.
and Jurassic Park movies.
This is my day,
Sorry, hang on,
and I pay
what?
you
There
to
were
make
so
sure I can
many
enjoy
moments. This
it.
went, hang on,
Understood? Yes.
what? Okay,
Good.
fine.
Now
Never
off
mind.
you
I'll just
go.
let you get away with it because
I
I've
have
kind of accepted
important
that's,
things to
we're
take
doing
care
Land
of.
of the Dinosaurs. That's absolutely fine. Go off and do that. I thought that there were individual set pieces were well done in terms of the kind of, there'll be set pieces in which there are chases and there are cliffhangers. However, in terms of the overall narrative, it felt to some extent like you were doing a bit of treading water. It felt like it wasn't, there was a bit of the two towers about it. There was a bit of the walking from A to B in order to get a story from here to here. And so I came out thinking, okay, it was all right. I'm going to dismiss that is that what I want from J.A. Bayona doing this is something which is better than all right. But the thing which I appreciate is, but I actually enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Jurassic World, because there's a joke at the beginning about about shoes, about having the proper footwear, and it has addressed some of the concerns of the first film. There were some things in the first of the Jurassic World which did need addressing. And there's a certain amount there. I do think that Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard make a fairly endearing central character. You could hear in their interview that they clearly get on well, and you can see that kind of friendly chemistry on screen. So I think it's fine. It's no more than fine. It did feel inessential. This is the thing that I said about Solo. I didn't feel like I needed it, but it was kind of okay while it was there. But there are moments in it, and specifically the Nosferatu moment, in which I think that's the film that I wanted this to have been. And of course it's not, because they're not going to sit down and go, let's make a franchise blockbuster that Kermit. They'll go, let's make a franchise blockbuster that plays like a roller coaster ride.
Chris Pratt is he's very likable. He's very good. There's one moment quite early on, I think, where he's drugged and he loses control of his body, and he does a kind of a snake slither to get out of peril. And I thought, I like that.
Yeah, there are moments, but don't you think that's it? It's a kind of meh with moments. The Mummy, which is latest reboot of the Mummy franchise, which dates back to the 1930s. It was revived, as you rightly said, in that series of trilogy. I think she was in the first two, wasn't she? Mummy and Mummy Returns. Then also gave us the Scorpion, and Wayne "The Rock" Johnson. That's the first time I was kind of aware of him. And at the beginning, there's a thing that says Dark Universe. universe revived. Universe brother. Who knows? I haven't really universe out. I'm kind of at the point when I would just like to see a film that existed in and of its own right. So anyway, we begin with some fantastically dull hot exposition that explains the backstory of Armanette and the deal that she made with the devil Seth, and how she was then, mummified alive and taken from there there's a whole bunch of exposition before we get. Then we come forward. Here's Tom Cruise in a Middle East conflict zone. He is Nick Morton, soldier, adventurer, Tomb Raider, and he is searching for antiquities to sell for a profit. He comes across the tomb of Armanette, the sarcophagus. Incidentally, everything I'm telling you now is in the trailer, and because I'm no longer sure what constitutes a plot, I'm only going to tell you what's in the trailer as far as there's one particular thing which I'm not going to reveal. I'm not going to. But anyway, this goes into the plane, and then the plane crashes, great big plane crash down, and the plane crash. Rightly,
Does he die in the first 10
well,
minutes?
he should be finished off, but he then wakes up in the morgue, still in the trailer, incidentally, still all in the trailer. He then wakes up in the morgue and finds one thing leads to another. He's in this weird lair overseen by Russell Crowe, experimenting once again with an English accent, who does some more explaining the plot.
Welcome to Prodigium, Mr. Morton. From the Latin, monstrum vel prodigium. Warning, monsters. Forgive the state of things, we had very little time to prepare for our guest, and only the information Jennifer provided to go on. In truth, she works for us. It's not an exact science, this business.
And the business being
Evil, Mr. Morton. Recognize, contain, examine, destroy. She is by far the most ancient we've ever encountered.
Here we go. That's
I was
explaining.
hoping he was going to burst into.
Welcome to the Barge Alcazar. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Tweeted this thing, but he said also there, Whitton on Thursday, Kermit Movie's review of The Mummy. I was sitting in front of him, I didn't get it, and we saw it together in the self-control. No, I was going to say that actually the reason that we didn't get anything was because there was no, despite the low plotting locations, the action set piece, mission, zero gravity, collapsing building.
Hey, good to see you.
Massive set, scenes of London being esteemed demonic terror. The
I think
post for the the moving post for the eye, in which the central eye does that thing that splits the pupils, which when you see it up in a great big billboard, all that looks good. Despite all that, I spent most of the film thinking, why is this quite so boring? And I think the reason is threefold. First, it's a film that looks like a load of other films that you would watch. Early on, you go, okay, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Wish I was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. Then it sort of becomes a bit Evil Dead-y, a bit American Werewolf, a bit, George Romero. And I just think, I really wish I was watching Evil Dead or George Romero or American Werewolf. And then it turns into a kind of just pretty straight with backstory, origin. And we think there are other superhero origin movies that I think I'd rather be watching. The second problem is that despite the fact that it's based on a very famous horror movie, and they've talked so much about honouring, it's not in any way scary. Now, arguably, it's never meant to be scary. It's not meant to be scary at all because it's it's not a scary movie. It's a Mission Impossible. But it is never scary. And there's part of me which thinks if you're going to do this
just
sort of
want to
thing,
remind you about
I'd
the
like it to be
lockdown
scary
drill tomorrow.
just a little bit.
That's right, 900 hours.
The third
And the
thing,
key
however, which I think is the most
still in the
important,
safe
is
for
that
security.
the script is just essentially, the film can't decide what it wants to be other than a Tom Cruise. And it's like, okay, it's a Tom Cruise vehicle, but what we want it into.
Need to activate the alarm with bonus models, otherwise nothing's gonna happen. Good. Yeah, I will do.
Also, listen, but it's basically
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
and it is so generic. That it really could have been called Tom Cruise. And then Tom Cruise's Mummy. It could have been called Tom Cruise's Mummy, yeah, exactly. If this is what the rest of the subsequent movies are going to look like, I can pretty much sign out of it now. I didn't hate it, because hate would actually involve being engaged and being swept up enough to have an emotional response to it. And there's a certain level at which, when you're making this kind of movie, there is a technical. I mean, there's an awful lot of CG, but there's an awful lot of set. There's just a certain level of technical achievement you have to take for granted, and no longer seems in any way. I saw it on a real big screen that being turned up to do, the 11 studio, and my main inability to be interested. And as I was watching it, I remember once saying that at the point that you find yourself not interested, that's the point at which you should. And I started thinking, is this me? Have I literally just got to the point with these kind of randoms that I just don't get? And then I saw Wonder Woman. And then I went, no, it's not me. This is me breaking.
Okay.
Not me, it's you. Here's the problem. It's because it is a Tom Cruise thing. No, it's just, the problem is it's so mechanical. It's just like some mechanical figure. It's like Pirates of the Caribbean. It just feels like we've got a Tom Cruise. What are we going to do? Let's regardless of what the actual origins of the project may or may not be, regardless of all the things it may be connected to, regardless of the scattering universes into which it may filter, regardless of who some of the other characters turn out to be, I have mentioned in this review, because not in the trailer, I can think, okay, well, is that going to be a plot spoiler? We don't want to get Star Trek. I know, but I'm just saying.
I don't know anything about this.
I just want to
I don't want to be the person to spoil anything. But the other thing I would say is that literally the moment Russell Crowe opened his mouth, I went, really?
activate the alarm.
Nice day.
Same to you, sir. Yeah, same code. 6.
I'm not sure how many people really thought that what the world needed was Guy Ritchie's take on the Arthurian legend. But in the past, Guy Ritchie has both delighted and dismayed. I quite like Lock, Stock, and I didn't feel like Revolver. I very much liked the Sherlock Holmes movies, and in fact, I use the Sherlock Holmes movies as an example of, isn't it great when somebody about whose work you've pretty much given up makes something that's really terrific? And he did it not once but twice. I thought those films had a real panache to them. I love Joie de Vivre. Yeah, they had a joie de vivre, exactly. Despite the fact that they look like Hammer horror films, they had the joie de vivre, which is a nice sort of dark and stuff. Now we have what I suppose can best be described as a sort of an origin story, a kind of superhero origin story of King Arthur. It's sort of the same story. So we start off, and you've seen the film as well, so please feel free to. We start off with a bunch of CGI-tastic landscapes and a massive sort of elephant versus wall fight sequence.
I was saying at that point.
That noise that you made just then, yeah. And there was the thing, Camelot, just always reminded me of it's only a model. Exactly. Yeah, so you and I were in exactly the same place.
That was my fear. I was waiting for Tim the Enchanter.
Okay, fine. Then, after some backstory explanation, we effectively get Charlie Hunnam is our hero, son of, and correct me if I'm wrong, because there were moments when I found myself losing the plot. Eric Banner's Uther Pendragon, yes, correct.
On behalf of His Royal Highness Omar Al-Ghazali, I
played by Jude Law. He's bang out of it. So, poor old Charlie Hunnam grows up in poverty whilst Law is left with all the scenery he can chew. And are sort of, this is like the Lion King, isn't it?
This bad uncle, Jafar, has taken over and everything else is dying. Bad uncle's in charge.
However, the sword, which is in the stone, remains a constant thorn in the side of the evil uncle, because he knows the prophecy that only the person who can pull the sword out is going to. So what he does is he gets every person in the country, every young man in the country, to come and have a go at the sword. You have to do it because he obviously wants to find who the person who pulled the sword out is. Enter, like a King Herod, enter
David Beckham.
David Beckham, who, as Charlie Hunnam has to step up to the sword, and David Beckham says, 10 fingers round the blunt end, give it a tug. Right foot, left foot, then back on the barge.
Oh, blimey.
I think that's all he says, actually. I think that's all. It's a lot of things, not Eric Cantona. However, obviously, before it comes out, next thing we know, Charlie and Jude having a stand-up is a clip.
You know why? Sorry, I'm just backstage muscle. I don't know anything about the tech stuff. Okay. Well, thank you for your help. Have a nice day. Well, same to you, sir.
You just never had good trouble.
I guess I know why you're Arthur's behind the scenes.
Sword of the Rings? Lord of the Rings, more like. No one will believe this. I went into this wanting it, not least because there had been stories already at box office, and there's nothing I like more than discovering that a film that has not, performed terrific work is actually a much better film than people give it credit for. And I would go back time and again to being in the cinema with Kim Newman watching Hudson Hawk and laughing like hyenas, and the more
Yeah, just want
everybody
to
did it.
remind you about the lockdown
And
drill tomorrow.
just because
That's
something
right,
doesn't
900 hours. And the key
box
cards to
office
activate the
doesn't
alarm
mean
still
it's
in the
better.
safe
Plenty of really, really
security
good movies that don't do well at the box
Yeah,
office.
same code.
I think this isn't one of them.
6, 9, 2,
It is a
7.
film which I
Don't tell
found
your mother what to do.
head-bangingly done.
Okay.
And considering how
Okay,
much
but remember,
stuff was
you
going
need to
on,
activate the alarm
and
on both
considering how
floors,
many
otherwise
stories within stories CGI and general spectacular whiffle was being thrown at the screen, I was really surprised by how unengaging and lengthy I found it. There is a thing that happens in the Sherlock Holmes movies, which is the kind of slow, almost sort of time slice fight sequences in which Robert Downey's character figures out he's going to do this, and then he'll do that, and then he'll do that, and then he'll do that. And I think it worked really well. I remember thinking, wow, this Guy Ritchie's got real style. He's figured out a way of doing this, of taking a tiny little bit of the Sherlock Holmes about him being interested in wrestling, and actually turning it into something which works really cinematically well. And credit where it's due, I think he made that. He made all that sing. In the case of this, it just looks like, you get the fight sequences, but they just look like some kind of cranked up version of The Football Factory with fantasy elements thrown in. There is a moment when one of the lead characters says, "Just do your fruitcaking job," and you think, I'm sorry.
Welcome to
this line. I know that there's certain things in it that are meant to be funny, but I don't think this is anything on the hoof. He doesn't actually say that.
No, I
Got that. And what happens? There's this constant thing about, let me tell you how this is going to work, and let me tell you a story, which so and so is going to do this, and then that, and then this happened, and then it'll be a bit late, a bit wait, a bit oh, a bit woo, a bit, and like every 5 minutes, everything stops. Somebody does some exposition in the manner of a bunch of Larry geezers planning out a job. It's going to go like this. He's going to go there. He's going to go there. He's going to go what? He's going to go where? He's going to what? And in the middle of all of that, there is a 3-second cameo by Guy Ritchie himself, which is the longest 3 seconds I've seen in a very long history. And every time they start doing another one of, Gooseback John is going to say to Blimey Charlie, and
he's going to say, Arthur Davies, a little dodgy, mate.
He is, King Arthur. He's all right. Okay, so he's done a bit of thieving. It's not a crime, is it? Well, it is technically a crime. That's what it is. It's King Arthur Daly. He's all right. That's, again, the best gag in this review, and it wasn't even me.
Well, you put it together. I didn't think.
Sorry, okay, I set it up.
King Arthur Daly. That's got to be the headline in your newspaper.
It's kind of slow. Maybe you can help.
But the other thing is, I found myself thinking, the other day when we were reviewing
as it should be. Do you know why? Sorry, I'm just
I was
backstage
talking about
muscle.
Orlando.
I don't know anything about the tech stuff.
And I said, where's
Okay.
Danny Dyer when you really need him?
Really surprised
And
me.
whilst I was watching
Well,
this, I was thinking,
Thank you
where's
for your
John
help.
Cena?
Have a nice day.
I mean, I never liked Excalibur very much. But at least Excalibur had a sense of
Okay, but remember,
fantastic mystery.
deactivate the alarm.
At least Excalibur had a sense of something of the world. I mean, yes, it was all that you brought me back stuff. I don't remember that. Merlin's stuff. In the case of this, I just like a little bit of mystery, just a little bit of magic, just a little bit of something that didn't look like an off-cut from a Rammstein video, attempting to do an impression of the Battle of Helm's Deep, and didn't. And whenever the clock ran down, I mean, you go, oh, there's the massive snake from Harry Potter. There's the sword that's attempting to look like a lightsaber. There's Jude Law turning into Emperor Palpatine. All it does is remind you of all the other fantasy franchises that you'd rather be watching. I thought it was stunningly done. At the beginning, Orlando Bland's son must search for the Trident of Poseidon. What? Yes, exactly. Must search for the Trident of Poseidon to end the curse, which has kept his father off our screens for a whole decade.
Which I think that's already.
To which the Trident of Poseidon. Have you got what's that you got there? That's the Trident of Poseidon, isn't it? And his son, he must search for. He's got. Anyway, so he must search for
next to the
in order to bring his father back to our screens. To which the entire audience shouts, "Why? Why?" Then, meanwhile, 9 years later, Javier Bardem sets up another thing, which is a big speech, which ends with "Dead men tell no tales," which then should lead into the title sequence, which is now Salazar's Revenge, because it's harder to have something which leads up to a title sequence which says Salazar's Revenge. So, even before we get to the titles, it's been a decade and 2 different openings. And then the titles start, and I think, already, I don't care. Already, I don't know, and I don't care. So the story is that essentially, we are going to do the usual thing that pirate movies do, that somebody has to go on a quest to find something, somebody else has to go on a quest to find something else, somebody else is trying to find the thing that the other people are trying to do, and in the middle of it all, Johnny Depp will do his stuff. So now we have essentially attempted to replace the old characters. Now we have Caspian as the new Kira and Orlando, which is kind of weird because those were always the characters about which I cared least anyway. And they are going to be the central interest in a drama which will bring together the old characters, including Johnny Depp. Here's a clip.
Our Royal Highness has never complained about it before.
I'm sorry, but Mr. Ingram, who is the Royal Highness's guest, has requested.
Hand me your sword. I don't have a sword. The soldier has the weapons. I'm currently watching the street. I'm not very good. You're a pirate, Captain Jack Sparrow. I understand. Captain Sparrow. No, you can't. I've spent years searching for Pants. A great pirate does not require such intricacies.
Do you know how long I've been waiting for this moment? The risks I've taken to be here. Are you sure you're the Jack Sparrow?
Scolidario, not Scolidario, because I'm already mixing up the words. And actually, it is the best thing in the film because it is the thing which, if you really feel, okay, fine, there's somebody trying to, to make the thing exciting and interesting and, and to give it some kind of oomph. Meanwhile, everybody else is going the other way. So firstly, we have Johnny Depp. Now, you could hear from that clip that Johnny Depp's performance from the original Pirates movies, which I know, which we just heard, that kind of, has got more broad and more sort of as the film goes on. So when we first meet him this time, he is literally flailing his arms around, waving his fingers. I know it's a bit much me complaining about that, waving his fingers around, grunting, gurning, incomprehensible, doing once again, I mean, I referred to that thing about it being a pantomime performance, and everyone has said in the past that it's meant to be Keith Richards, and I said it sounds like a very bad impression of David Bowie. Well, this time he's so overdone the sort of drunken Jack Sparrow thing with his accent weirdly goes to the other side of the world, and he starts to sound Australian. He starts to sound more like Olivia Newton-John or Jason, what's his face? I mean, so there are literally
Just thinking of an Australian.
there are lines in it that are delivered in the manner of somebody clearly attempting to do an Australian accent. Beyond that, you get the usual stuff in which everybody comes forth with a bunch of exposition. And so there's a trident, there's a compass, there's a curse, nobody mentions the fact that there's presumably a very large check and a bank balance that are being sorted out, because actually the thing that's driving all this stuff is, is clearly, it's financially motivated as opposed to any sense of, of it being an artistic venture. Not so much Basil exposition as Basil imposition, everything constantly imposing, there's another bit of the story, there's another bit of the story, there's another bit of the story, there's another bit of the story. You can just follow one thread of the story, just do something that's interesting. So all that's set up, and then we have to get into the celebrity cameos. And as we've, it's not a thing to give it away that there is a celebrity cameo by a top-level pop star, whom I have to say made David Beckham's cameo telling Charlie Humdrum in King Arthur to put 10 fingers around the blunt end and give it a yank look positively Shakespearean.
It is.
Yeah, well,
I've already said it.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, then it's Paul McCartney. Ringo Starr. It's Paul McCartney. And, it's one of those, okay, fine, here we've got a cameo by a famous pop star because we've got a cameo by a famous pop star. Then there's yet another in the long line of Pirates of the Caribbean's comic execution scenes. So at one point they end up somewhere called Hangman's Bay, all sort of routine with a guillotine. This is something that they seem to spend a lot of time doing in the Pirates films. There are zombie sharks. There is a moment when a zombie shark jumps over the boat, which just seems to be designed so that you can say, yes, this all jumped the shark many, many years ago. However, the thing that's perhaps most grueling about the film is that amidst all the he's the trident and he's the pearl and he's the thing and he's the what's it thing, there is dialogue that appears to have been written by the team who brought us Carry On Columbus. And just to demonstrate this, I put together a little competition called Is It Pirates of the Caribbean Salazar's Revenge, or is it Carry On Columbus? I will give you the line.
Is this for me or
it's for you?
It's for me, okay.
For you, okay?
Okay,
here we go, fine. A one-legged man with 18-pound balls, no wonder he walks funny.
I'm going to say that's Pirates of the Caribbean.
You would be right. He brings news of what the Lisbonians are getting up to. I don't care what they get up to, as long as they don't do it in the street and frighten the camels.
Carry On Columbus.
Yes, well, you're very good at this. Okay. I'm a horologist. There's no shame in that, madam. Okay, I just can't believe you laughed at that joke.
Okay, I'm going to say that's Carry On.
No, that's Pirates of the Caribbean. Very good. Okay. I'm off to Italy next week. Michelangelo wants me to do up the ceiling. Well, mind you hang on to something while you're up there.
Carry On.
Yeah, because obviously it's... Yeah. I'm not paying for that. Never say that to a woman.
Pirates.
Shockingly, it is Pirates. I saw her ankles. You would have seen a whole lot more if you kept your cake hole shut.
It's going to be Carry On.
No, that's Pirates of the Caribbean. We are to be allies, considering where your left hand is. I'd say we're more than that.
Pirates.
Yes. Last one. We've just had a leak in the hold. Did you? Next time, do it over the side.
Funny. Pirates.
No. Carry On Columbus. Okay. What that demonstrates, I think, is that you can literally mix up the lines from these two films, and it is impossible to tell which is which.
Did we ever find the trumpet of Poseidon? What is it?
The trident of Poseidon.
Trident of Poseidon. Trumpet of Poseidon.
The Trumpet of Poseidon was a Viz comic strip that was put into retirement.
The Trident of Poseidon.
Okay, so
but what is it?
It's the Poseidon's trident.
Do we find it?
Simon, that would give it. Well, I'd say that would be a plot spoiler, except for the fact that there is very little. It's not that there's very little. There is much too much. On the one hand, you have some spirited performances. On the other hand, you have Johnny Depp. You have the visuals that we have seen before, the stories that we have heard before and been told before, leaping over themselves and jumping the shark. in a way that seems so self-referential that one would imagine that it's self-parodic, except for the fact that it doesn't even seem to do that. You have people on the screen laughing at jokes and cheering moments in the film, clearly, because there's nothing coming towards it. Somebody tells a joke, somebody on screen laughs. Somebody does something heroic, everybody cheers. Why? Because the audience aren't doing it for you. When it comes to the great big set-piece finale, I quite literally struggled to stay awake. I just thought, I have wasted so much time with this. So I think that even the people who are Pirates fans will think that this is really, really stretching a point. I think that the sense that this is not finished, this is not going anywhere, this is going to take money, this is going to carry on, this ship is going to, go on into stranger tides even, is very, very palpable. And I thought, it's not the worst of them, it's not the best of them, it is, however, the most unremarkably boring of all of them. The first thing to say is that it is interesting how now everybody except the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, the last one, the third one, the one which I really would want was actually published. I mean, for ages, I was saying no one enjoyed it. Yeah, they did. Now it's funny how revisionist history is. People go, yeah, well, we did. It's the same way with Mike Bay when Transformers 2 came out, and I was saying it's just poisonous bad. Now, if you look at their reaction, the people who make it is that, oh yeah, we dropped the ball. Shia LaBeouf says we dropped the ball. Michael Bay says, yeah, we kind of got lost and it was a little bit of a mess and this thing was all over the place. And then recently, now talking about Clash of the Titans. When Clash of the Titans came out, we all say this retrofitting 3D is nonsense. They all had to say it was great. And they all went, yeah, it was rubbish, wasn't it? And, Louis Leterrier says, yeah, it wasn't my idea. I didn't want it. It's really funny how all the things that I've said about those right now, no, it's not. What it is, right at the very beginning, that I think we can all agree that Pirates of the Caribbean was especially rubbish.
Hello.
Which started.
Yeah, just wanted to remind you about the lockdown drill tomorrow. That's right, 900 hours.
And I still stand kind of anger that was having to stick through Pirates.
No?
So, it's really not possible to get
Hey,
out.
stop! If you don't stop, there'll be trouble.
So it's Rob Marshall, okay? And the story is, this is interesting. Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides is nominally based on a novel by Tim Powers, which apparently, according to the credit, which suggested the story, which is a lovely phrase because there is the suggestion of a story in here, but that is all there ever is, the suggestion of a story. As with all of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, because in the end, it's a film based on a fairground. The problem has always been that they can't find any narrative way through it, and Gore Verbinski couldn't tell a story to save his life anyway. In fact, Rango is the most coherent piece of storytelling that he's done. In the case of this, right, it starts with a kind of James Bond-like opening with Jack Sparrow is dressing up as a judge to get one of his shipmates out of prison because he's going to bust them out. But then they end up in the court of the king who needs to employ them as pirates to run a ship to go and do something. They haven't got a ship, but then it turns out Penelope Cruz is in a pub pretending to be Jack Sparrow. She has got a ship, but that ship is actually under the control of Ian. And you're going, what? Fine. Then the next thing, we're at sea and we're going off to do something. What are we going off to do? We're going off to find the goblet with the thing, and then the thing with the human, with the fountain of youth, but the thing about the white cap, and there's somebody else is coming, and he's had a thing with her before, but then there's the other bit with, and it is the classic Pirates case, which is that there is no story. Despite the fact that somewhere in the genetic makeup of all of this, there is a novel, there is no story. There is a collection of bits. Here is one of those bits.
I need those chalices. Shoot. Save me the bother of the phone. We will go. We'll return. I will kill.
I'm really not sure about these ring batteries.
Give me 6 more pistols. You move the shot. You don't tell me. You get your children, Mr. Sparrow. Not even loaded.
Yeah, I just want to remind you about the lockdown drill tomorrow. That's right, 900 hours. And the key cards to activate the alarm system.
That was one of the things. Now, if you just sit there and go, okay, it's a collection. I mean, it's directed by Rob Marshall. And Rob Marshall is best known for doing music in Chicago.
Delta, move out. I'm watching your set.
Songs,
Get moving, Delta.
Individually choreographed bit. I know, you know, there's some musicals. It's just an excuse to get from one song to the next song, and the bit in between doesn't really make any difference. In the same way as a fairground, you go from one set piece to the next set piece to the next set piece, and then you get off. The difference is that with the fairground ride, it lasts about 10 minutes. In the case of this, it's 137 minutes, which is, I think, by pirate standards, is pretty short, although it still felt pretty long, because at no point do you feel that the story actually kicks in. But then if you start to unpick it and think, I mean, watching it, I was just bored. I was just plain bored. I was, not involved, not interested, didn't laugh. I mean, the Johnny Depp, vocal intonations still aren't funny. But you start to then think, okay, fine, it's boring and it's uninvolving and it's all over the place and there isn't a story and it's a collection of bits that have been put together by a group of accountants who are just striking that thing, fine. It is a fairground. But then you go, but hang about a minute. In the first Pirates, the gag was, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you saw the first Pirates, the gag was that Jack Sparrow was a wastrel, a scoundrel. He wasn't the greatest pirate in the world. The whole point was the legend was not true to form. In fact, in real life, it's a bit David Bowie, Anthony, it's a bit of King Richard, it's a bit like that, but it wasn't actually. That was the gag, right? And as is with David Foster, was it? Oh, good evening, Jack Sparrow. But as is with the case with all these things, once the central character kind of has got through the end of the third movie, they have to become the thing that they weren't in the first place. I mean, you think about Toxic Avenger, for example. Toxic Avenger falls in a battle, becomes a Toxic Avenger, but he's still a janitor. By the time we get to the third Toxic Avenger, he's a superhero. In the case of this, Jack Sparrow starts off gagging, he's just all over the place. He isn't a great pirate, but in this one, he's swashbuckling, he's fighting, he is the greatest pirate on Earth. He's an incredible lover who has this really, racy hidden past with Penelope Cruz, and all this stuff is going on. Penelope Keith. Actually, now that's where they missed the trick. That would have been quite interesting. We should have had Penelope Keith, but in fact we didn't. And so what you get is for a start, he's grown into the legend. So the costume has become, less comedically ironic. He just looks like a rapscallion who's making it all up to. One gag he had, one single gag, has now gone because that's no longer a gag anymore. Because although he's still doing the, all this sort of stuff, the kind of strange hand wavy things, I can't talk, I understand. He is no longer, the central gag is that in fact he's not the stuff that he's made out to be. The rest of it is just elements being chucked in. I mean, Geoffrey Rush is in there, obviously, which reminds you of that thing in Shakespeare in Love, and they say, romance, tragedy, and a bit with a dog. Well, this is just nothing, and a bit with a dog. And there's a bit with some mermaids. There's some CGI stuff with some mermaids. Secondly, the 3D is just all over the place, as you would expect. And for a long time, I just took the pieces off and watched it without them. And you know what? It didn't look any better or worse. It looked a little bit brighter. But there are whole sections of the movie which are going on in which the 3D has no function at all. You've seen the bit in the trailer in the sword. There's a couple of bits when Geoffrey Rush will wave the sword at the camera in the manner of the old 3D movies, which is, hey, we spent all this money 3D-ifying it. You know what? You better waggle something in the audience's face, otherwise they'll wonder why they're wearing those annoying glasses. And so what you end up with is something that spends an awfully long time, although not as long as its predecessors, doing a load of things that don't ever actually get anywhere, not doing the one central gag that I didn't think was that funny the first time, but isn't even there now, in 3D, with all the resources in the world thrown at it, and you get the sense that it isn't any longer anything to do with movie making. It is, in fact, in an odd way, closer to its origin, which is that it is a mechanical banking system. That, you sit down, and some stuff happens, you pay your money, you put the glasses on, some stuff happens, and everything is recognizable because you know that person, you know that thing, you know where that is, you know where that comes from, you know where that, you have got no idea where the plot's going, but it doesn't matter because you're on sort of clattery track that will just lead you A, B, C, D, even though these elements are not in any way connected up, and at the end you'll get off and go, what was all that about? I promise you, I had to sit down and think really hard. You know what the story is?
Wait up, who are you?
Goes looking for something.
He's doing this now.
And somebody else is looking for it as well. Does he find it?
or does someone else find it?
Well, that would be giving away the end, wouldn't it? So, I mean, it's not, you know, as I said, it's not something that's worth getting furious about. I mean, certainly it's not as staggeringly misjudged as the third part, because it is just nothing. It is just a big, empty nothing. Whereas part three, it's just nothing at all.
How do you feel about the longer risk of catastrophic loss?
Excuse me?
First thing to say is that, as I said before, this isn't a film. You have to understand it as an industrial moment. 3D is going down the toilet. This is the sort of the death throw. You know, as Rome was about to collapse, the Colosseum gained more and more absurd. They started filling the Colosseum with water and getting ships in and tying people to masts, and because basically this is what happens when civilizations are about to collapse. In the case of Transformers 3, we all know that 3D is going down the path. So this is the last.
But you keep telling
Fine, okay. We'll have this conversation in a year's time. But this is the raving death threat. As far as Transformers 2 is concerned, what happened was I said it's horrible, overlong, stupid, vulgar, crass, misogynistic, and all that stuff. And everyone went, "Oh, you're just being a critic. Oh, you're just being a critic. Stop complaining about it." A couple of years later, everyone accepted that, right, including the people who made the film. Shia LaBeouf said, "Yeah, we let people down. We're not very proud of it." Michael Bay himself used the word crap in relation to it. So I'm sorry. I'd like a written apology right now for the fact that I was right back then 2 years ago. And when all the whinging happens now, people go, "Oh, critic complaining about Transformers 3, critic complaining about Transformers." In 2 years' time, can I have the same written apology when you've all accepted that what this
The
is?
people who disagree with you all talk
They
like
all
that.
talk like that. That's how it works. After the horror of the second one,
I only saw the first half.
you did.
I was interviewing John
You didn't
Turturro.
even get as far as John Turturro getting in, you know, wearing these pants. I mean, you got off quite. They said you learnt the lesson. No disjointed plot of script, terrible acting, crass sexualization of a child's toy, terrible and borderline racist comic influence, and way too long. So, have they addressed it? Firstly, the plot. I mean, one of the things that people who like this film said in its favour is it actually has a story. The story is Apollo missions went to the moon in order to get back a bit of an Autobot Decepticon, and the whole thing was a put-up job. So, okay, you go fine. So that's the Sentinel. That's the Arthur C. Clarke short story on which 2001 was based. This, incidentally, is 15 minutes longer than 2001, a film which went from the beginning of civilization to the birth of a new species. This takes 15 minutes longer. It's also a little bit Capricorn 1, and it does enable them to take places like Chernobyl and say, "Oh, well, that wasn't, you know, the horror that it actually was. Actually, that was a Transformers-related interlude." As somebody who's been to the Ukraine, I wonder how that joke is going to play. But there is nominally a plot. At least there is a plot for the first 20 minutes, and then they forget about the plot and they get down to the rest of the stuff. Terrible acting. Well, it's the way that Michael Bay deals with terrible acting is this. It's not, okay, let's have better acting. It's, let's get some people in to do the acting so that we can get on with the rest of the movie. So you have a cameo. Can you believe this? Well, they can want to do some acting. And it's like a special effect. It's like, well, in this bit we need to have some exploding helicopters. In this bit we need to have some acting. Can we